Great. Oh, how are we going to do it? Yay. Okay. Will you in both of them?
Let's just we'll have to cut a little bit.
We'll have to cut a little bit. All right. We're gonna start a live soon in like a couple minutes. We'll just wait and see if some people want to jump on.
Oh, I should grab my Yoni.
Yeah, we're talking about Yoni eggs today. All about Yoni eggs. Everything you want to know about them. Well, if you have questions, you can ask them as we go through. Or at the end. Maybe we should wait until the end. And then that way when people want to...
Are our Yonis the same size?
Yeah. Mine's... I think yours looks a little bit bigger than mine.
Yeah, just a little bit.
They still probably both count as medium, though. And your hole is drilled differently. Yours is drilled like across, and mine's like end to end.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. All right, we have some people. Good morning, well, it's morning here. I don't even, I guess it's probably not morning in most other places because it's just barely the morning here. We're at like super far West Coast Canada. So, yeah, so this morning we are going to be talking about Yoni eggs. Yoni eggs, that's Sarah's. Hers is Obsidian, it's black, and here's mine. Mine is Jade. So, Jade eggs, Yoni eggs, same idea. Jade eggs are just made of jade. And yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about why we use them, some really important things about when not to use them or recommendations for not using them. And good morning.
Oh, good evening.
Oh, good evening. Yes. Awesome. And then, yeah, if you guys have any questions or anything like that at the end, we'd be happy to answer questions that you have. So yeah, I guess we'll kind of start about what the Yoni egg. So I did a video on a jade egg. I called it Jade Eggs. Jade Eggs, Yoni Eggs last week about all of the benefits for using them. Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Wicked. And so Jade eggs are amazing. I mean, one of the main reasons I started using it was for pelvic floor strength. So it can help to strengthen the pelvic floor muscles, but it also helps to increase access to orgasm. It helps to increase access to pleasure and sentience in the vaginal canal. It helps with just like awareness. There are certain energetic properties that are fantastic about it as like a healing stone. It can help release stored emotional pain or tension or memories, trauma, abuse, all those sorts of things. It is multifaceted and it's amazing. I have a video on it that I released last week that I do talk in more detail about everything about benefits of using the jade egg. So you can watch that one for a little bit more. But this morning we were actually going to share a bit about our own personal journeys with it, why we decided to start using it. And then, yeah, I'm also going to mention a couple times when you want to avoid using it because there are a few restrictions. But yeah, do you want to start with your, like, why you started using it?
Sure.
Great.
Cool. So I mentioned this in one of my videos that I did not too long ago. Kendra is much more of an expert on the jade egg than I am. I'm a little bit new I'm a little bit more of a newbie user. So I became aware of the Yoni egg when I was studying holistic health. So I've been really curious about starting to use it for a few years now. And what sort of really got me to commit to buying a Yoni egg was my job. So Kendra and I actually both teach aerobics. I don't know if you know that, but we met teaching fitness programs, and I teach a floor aerobics program where we're often jumping and doing jumping jacks and star jumps and all sorts of weird, crazy things.
High impact
aerobics. And I started doing this program, I don't know, about 7 years ago, and I never really had any problems. But when I would do it, I would see women running to the washroom all of the time. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. Why are they going to the washroom every 5 minutes? And then after kind of going through a lot of my own sort of trauma when it came to like healing from my eating disorder and going through a lot of tough times in my life, in my like early 20s, I would do this program and I would pee my pants. Every time I would do a jumping jack or a tuck jump, I would pee my pants a little bit. And at first I thought it was sweat, but it was definitely a lot more liquid that was coming out. And I was really confused as to why my pelvic floor muscles were so weak and I couldn't hold in my bladder. I actually started noticing it a lot too when I was doing CrossFit, and every time I would do like double unders and jump rope, a little bit of pee would come out and I would hate it so much. So I couldn't teach in like the color. I can't wear these pants when I teach because they're too clear. I'd only be able to wear like black pants doing CrossFit or teaching. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I can't ignore this anymore. My body's trying to tell me something. And being a personal trainer myself, I know that if you want to strengthen your muscles, you have to train them and you have to use them. So a Yoni egg was a really great tool for me to buy to help strengthen these muscles and sort of improve my pelvic floor health. And on top of that, like Kendra mentioned, it can be a spiritual practice as well. Because I am also still pretty young, a lot of women who do struggle with bladder control in exercise, they are people who have had children, and I haven't had children yet. So I'm talking to these women who are almost double my age, and it's like, yeah, like I pee myself a little bit when I'm doing classes, but I haven't had kids. So that's sort of where it was a little bit off for me. And I think it also has to do with a lot of this like suppression and emotional trauma that I've been through in my life potentially as well. So this is also a really great way to connect with yourself. It's a really spiritual practice and deepen the relationship that you have with yourself. So it can also be a self-love and a self-care practice on top of strengthening your pelvic floor health and all of the benefits that come along with that. As Kendra mentioned, it can help your sex life too. So
for sure. And that's why you chose, do you want to tell them why you chose Obsidian?
Yeah, and so when I purchased this, I was actually originally looking for a Jade Egg. The website that was recommended to me by a really close friend of mine, they actually didn't have Jade on their website, or maybe they were sold out, but they had the one that I chose, which is Black Obsidian. They had Rose Quartz, they had Amethyst. And I chose Black Obsidian because the Obsidian stone is all about releasing emotional trauma. And when I purchased this stone last year, I was going through a really hard time in my life, and I was having a really hard time letting go of a certain scenario. And the description of this stone was all about releasing and letting go of things that are not within your control. And last year, when I was going through this time, I was like, I need this, and I'm going to put it in my vagina. So I chose this one.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I just saw a question come up about what is the best way to actually hold the egg inside the yoni, and whether you're contracting your abs as well. It should just be a contraction of the pelvic floor. So you actually want to try to relax the thighs. So like your quads, your glutes, your stomach, you're supposed to try to keep that as relaxed as possible and just focus on the pelvic floor muscles, which is the squeezing and releasing that you would feel when you are trying to stop the flow of urine. And also the anal sphincter, like squeezing and releasing. It's like stopping the flow of urine and stopping a fart from coming out. Those are like the muscles that you're using. Also, when you stand up with the egg in, you shouldn't have to clench at all. Like you shouldn't be clenching and bearing down, like not bearing down, but like really squeezing hard so that it doesn't slip out. As like the folds of tissue and just like the leanness and tightness through the vaginal canal should hold the egg in place by itself, and then you add resistance and things like that to actually start to build the muscles. The folds of tissue should just hold it in place. Your vaginal canal is actually collapsed when it's not aroused. When you get aroused, it actually inflates a little bit and it elongates, but it's usually collapsed. So when you insert an egg in, you'll be like a little bit aroused to help get it in, but it should be pretty tight around the egg. If you do stand up and it slips out, that's okay. It just means that you need to start with lying down practices. If you start with lying down practices and just putting it in and adding a little bit of tension and things like that, and just even breathing into it and squeezing around it, like doing a Kegel exercise, but around the egg, you'll start to increase like the leanness and the firmness of those of the muscles in the tissue, so that even without a clench, you can stand up and it'll stay in. Like there are people who wear their yoni eggs around all day long, and you certainly can't like be clenching the whole time you have it in if you're wearing it for hours on end. So yeah, you shouldn't have to clench at all. But when you are doing exercises, just the pelvic floor, just squeezing and releasing of the pelvic floor when you're adding weight and things like that. But yeah, so my story with the Jade Egg was actually about I discovered it 4 years ago now, I think. And I heard about it through a tantric teacher and sex coach called Kim Anami. She has a course called Vaginal Kung Fu, and she also has a Instagram account called #ThingsILiftWithMyVagina, and she just lifts, like she just weight lifts with her vagina. I think she can lift like 10 or 11 pounds or something like that was the last time I had heard. The world record, guess, I haven't told you this, guess what the world record is for weightlifting with your vagina? Like how much could you hold?
75 pounds.
Oh, that's huge. No, it's not. It's 31.
I'll do it.
31. You'll do 31 pounds. Great. If you could do 75, I'll give you $1 million. But that's great. So anyways, so I found out about it through vaginal kung fu. I was like, oh my gosh, I want this strong vagina. I want to have like this tight, amazing vagina. And so that's what I started doing with it. And then the more I actually started practicing, I realized that I actually don't have a lot of sensation in my vagina. I thought, I didn't have tons of access. Like I had access to a clitoral orgasm. I didn't have access to vaginal orgasms. And I thought maybe it was because my muscles weren't strong enough, because orgasm is a series of muscular contractions. So I was like, oh, maybe I just need to get stronger muscles inside and then I'll have more orgasms, because I don't have those. But the more I worked with the egg, the more I realized that I'm like, I don't feel anything. Like I have like almost no sensation. I'm pretty numbed out. And that's been almost my entire experience with my vagina. The first time I had sex, I didn't feel anything except for like a little bit of pressure and like fullness, which at the time I was like, this is great, because so many females are told, sex is going to hurt the first time. It's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. It's not going to be a pleasant experience. You're not going to finish, blah, 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 blah. That's the message that we get usually as kids and adolescents. And so the fact that it didn't hurt me, I was like, yeah, I'm awesome. I won. But I, like years later, after years and years of sex where I still wasn't feeling almost anything, I was like, maybe this is not a great thing. Maybe this is a bit of an issue. And then when I started learning more about the Jade Egg, originally I had done it for the strength training, which is wonderful. I think that's a huge benefit of it. And really just the more I used it, the more sensation I started to feel, just because I had mindful attention on my yoni. Putting it in, adding like a little bit of resistance so that you can feel it on the walls inside, breathing into it, and just squeezing and releasing different parts of the vaginal canal to see where you have the most access to pleasure and sensation and which parts are the most numb or insensitive. Was just such a huge learning process for me, and it was amazing. The more I kind of pictured myself going into this practice like really hardcore, like I'm just gonna lift so much weight, and then I found that actually the more gentle I was with myself, the more patient I was, and the slower that I went, the more benefits I actually got out of the practice, because the more I was able to access sensation in different parts of my vaginal canal, my cervix, my G-spot. I woke it up. It was like my yoni was like numb and like frozen, and the Jade Egg was a tool that I used to kind of de-thaw it, which was really magical almost. It was it's not uncommon for females to experience having numb genitals a lot, because again, the negative sexual messaging that we get, the shame associated with sex and with our genitals, and the fact that we're not like that, genitals are ignored a lot as children. There's this phenomenon called the genital hole. Dr. Jack Moran, he's a American psychotherapist and sex therapist who talks a lot about the genital hole. And he's like, when we talk about our bodies, we often ignore that piece. It's taught to like, we ignore it, we shut it down. It's dirty, it's naughty, it's not something that you're supposed to share with other people, it's not something that you touch, it's not, anything like that, it's a secret. And consequently, our brains turn off sensitivity to it. It's like, okay, so we're not going to pay attention to it, so we should, that's not important. So it shuts it down, and again, because then we also don't exercise it, we have weaker muscles there, and so there's not as much blood flow to the area. When there's not as much blood flow to the area, you also don't feel as much. And it's this process that is socialized into us from a very young age to like ignore that area of our body, so it is not going to be as sensitive. And then also, again, a lot of the messages that we get around sex being shameful or not something we should be doing until a certain age or marriage, and again, that it will be painful the first time you have sex, or it's not going to be enjoyable, or lots of women can't have orgasms this way or that way or the other. And our brains are powerful, our thoughts are powerful, and they 100% affect the way that our bodies actually show up and the way our bodies actually respond. And so we've kind of trained ourselves subconsciously, culturally, socially, to shut down. And so it's not uncommon that women have numbed out genitals, and that was my experience. I had a totally numb vagina, and so the Jade Egg was a huge tool that I used to be like, wake up, like let's start feeling more things. Let's start having more orgasms. It's a beautiful thing. We have so much potential down there that's just not being tapped. So yeah, that was my experience. That's kind of why I wanted to start using it and everything like that, and how it's been so far. And it's still an ongoing process of going on, because sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes when your genitals are numb, it goes first to pain and then to pleasure. It's almost like, especially people who have experienced sexual abuse, like a physical sexual assault, because the tissues have been damaged and they first went through pain, they'll numb out to be like, we don't want to feel that anymore. So we're just going to numb out because it's safer to not feel anything than to feel pain associated with sex. And so that's what happens. But then the process of undoing that, often when you de-thaw it, at first you'll actually start feeling pain and tension in certain areas. And then you have to keep breathing through it and almost like massaging it out and like relaxing into it to, again, then open up to pleasure. So we're born with the potential for pleasure. Sometimes it goes through pain to numbness. And so it has to go from numbness to pain to pleasure, if that makes sense. Does that make sense the way that I said that?
Yes.
Yes. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, and just one other thing on that note is also a lot of first experiences of having things inserted into the vaginal canal is like tampons and like doctor's appointments, which we're not aroused for those things. Usually, I mean, I don't know, maybe some people get aroused at the doctor. I'm sure it happens. But usually tampons, my first tampon insertion experience was painful and awful and not great. So our vaginas are crazy, crazy wise, and they like remember what happened, and they're like, when things go in here, it hurts. So let's like not feel anything that goes in there because that's better than pain. So again, shuts down. Lots of people have shut down genitals. So yeah, so that's why I use the Jade Egg. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
If anyone has any questions about Jade Eggs, we'll do our best to like read your comments and answer them as we go along. But otherwise, maybe we should talk about some. Also, Elise, if you're still watching, I love you so much, and I miss you. Yeah. I hope you're well. Anyways, so let's talk about maybe when you should not use a jade egg. So before you sort of are like, yeah, that sounds really great, I'm going to buy a jade egg, there are some things to consider before inserting a foreign object into your vagina.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that.
We're going to talk about that. So the first one would be, this one's probably the most controversial, is pregnancy. So with pregnancy, there's lots of people who will say like, no, just don't do it. Absolutely don't do it. Especially for the first 2 trimesters. After about 8 months, they say after 8 months, the pregnancy is usually stable enough that you could probably do some very gentle practices, but again, really gentle lying down, more breath work and internal massage practices where you just use the egg to kind of like massage out tender pieces, as opposed to like intense like strength training. So that said, the person who I first learned this from, again, like I said, was a sex coach called Kim Anami. And she says pregnancy is the best time to start using a jade egg because it strengthens the pelvic floor muscles and all the muscles that you're going to be actually using to birth your child. So she thinks it's a great time to start practice, or maybe not start practicing, but to practice throughout. Ultimately, I would say listen to your body. If you have never used a jade egg before, I wouldn't take up the practice. Like I wouldn't start practicing once you get pregnant, because it can be a very delicate process, especially right in the beginning. And like a delicate like pregnancy, I mean, like in the beginning, miscarriage is very common in the first 3 months. And not that, I mean, the egg doesn't go into your uterus, it's in your vaginal canal, and tightening and releasing the muscles like logically shouldn't have a huge effect. And if you've never used those muscles, and suddenly you start activating and it causes different contractions. There's also different energetic reasons. There's some Taoists who use the egg say that it can pull energy away from the baby or away from the fetus, and you don't want that because it has such an energetic pull. So there's different reasons why lots of doctors and tantra teachers would advise not using the jade egg during pregnancy. The one thing that I did find was, again, something that was common was after 8 months. So for the last month, if you'd like to, you can. And if the jade egg is something you have been using for years or like 6 months plus with lots of like regular practice, I imagine it would be much safer to continue use throughout your pregnancy. It's kind of like they say that with all exercise, basically. It's like if you have been exercising or you have been a runner, then when you get pregnant, you don't have to change that habit. You can actually keep doing what you're doing because your body's already acclimatized to it. Whereas lots of people will get pregnant and then they'll start to take up exercise because they are afraid of their body changing. And so they start exercising and then their bodies can't handle it, or it's not as good for the fetus because you're all of a sudden doing something where you're, it's a brand new experience and your body's not acclimatized to that sort of change. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot of the times when people do become pregnant, they want to do all of these really positive things for their bodies and stuff, but it's one of those things where it's like you can wait another 9 months, wait till you're not pregnant. We don't want to be doing anything that the body's not already used to while in pregnancy because that's such a delicate time for our bodies. So it can wait if you're unsure. And the same with exercise, any form of exercise. Anyone comes into my step class who's like, I actually had this one lady come into step one time and she's like, I'm pregnant and I don't want to gain weight and I've never done step. I was like, not the right time to start.
It's not the right time to start.
It's not the right time to start if you're not. Anyways, sidebar.
Yeah. So the other one would be an IUD. If you have an IUD, did you want to talk about this a little bit?
Well, I've never personally had an IUD,
Okay.
but from what I understand, if you insert a Jade Egg while also having an IUD, it could potentially move the IUD or alter your IUD in some sort of way. And I've never had an IUD. I've heard people tell me that they can be uncomfortable sometimes, and I can only imagine that if the two of them come in contact with one another, that it could be uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, the strings of your IUD will come out of your cervix, and so the egg, you're contracting and stuff, and realistically, it's highly, well, I don't know. It's not super likely that it will interfere, and especially if it's brand new. Your IUD, like even when I used to use a Diva cup, and my doctor said when I got an IUD, and she said, don't use your Diva cup for at least 6 months because you need to give the IUD time to like solidify more within the uterus so that it's not as likely to move around. Same with the Jade Egg. If you just get a fresh IUD and then you're putting a Jade Egg up in there, it could compromise the strings. The Jade Egg also has a string attached to it. It could get tied around the strings. You just don't want to do anything that, if you're tugging on that, one, you could pull it right out. Two, you could compromise its ability as a contraceptive, or it can tear the uterine lining and things, and so it can be quite sensitive. So be very, very careful. I would say don't use a Jade Egg for the first 6 months after you've gotten an IUD, and then after that, take it very slowly. Listen to your body. If you don't want to use it at all, that's completely your call. I had an IUD. I don't have it anymore, but when I did have an IUD in, I used my Jade Egg, and I never had any issues. I had it in for, again, at least 6 months, and I didn't have any issues. And that was a personal choice that I did and I took at my own risk. It turned out, but we can't guarantee that for anybody. So again, listen to your body and go at your own pace. A show and tell. No, not today. And then, chronic pelvic pain. So like I was saying with, like, lots of people have numbness in the vaginal canal and in the yoni. And then other people have like chronic pain, pelvic pain, tenderness, soreness, like really, really tight constricted muscles that have shut down. Often, again, this can be a result of not using them or a result of trauma or abuse. Our muscles will just lock out anything. Vaginismus, vulvodynia, things like that, which is like pain. Vulvodynia is like pain in the vulva and around the entrance to the vagina. It's like a burning. Vaginismus is like really chronically tight, like you can't get almost anything in there. And those are common outcomes to sexual abuse and trauma, as well as embodied shame and negative sexual messaging. So if that is the case, forcing a Jade Egg up there, not a good idea. Your yoni is beautiful and naturally receptive, and it will bring and welcome and receive things in when it's ready. So if it's not ready to do that, if you're trying to get a Jade Egg in and it won't go in, absolutely do not force it. Absolutely do not force it. I'm going to do in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to do a couple videos on just basic practices. One of the most basic ones is sipping, which is literally like sipping it into your vagina, not whistling it in. You can try that.
I meant to slurp.
It's like sipping it in, and you're literally never like pushing the egg in. It's like a gentle process. And if your body isn't ready to do that or is too tight to do that, don't do it. Absolutely don't force a Jade Egg. And if there's like chronic pelvic pain, you want to be massaging that out and probably seeing either a somatic sex educator or some sort of pelvic floor physiotherapist or something to get rid of like tension and pain before you're doing any sort of strength training. Certainly with the Jade Egg, because if it's already chronically tense, you don't want to try to make it even more tight. That would be counterproductive. So chronic pelvic pain, address pain before you start strength training, and don't use the egg if you cannot naturally like kind of suck and coax it in with your own yoni. It should not be pushed and forced in. And then the last one is just on your period. This is fine. I mean, lots of people do use it on their period and they think it's like magical and lovely and like, la, 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 this is lovely. I'm connecting with all my womanly bits and pieces. And if that's your cup of tea, like go for it. I'm not saying no. And I usually take a break when I'm on my period. I use it as a time to cleanse the egg. I usually put it in a nice little bath. I give it like warm water with some tea tree oil and lavender oil. It's really special. It's kind of like a nice little ritual that I do once a month to cleanse the egg. And your lady bits are working so hard during their period, and they're tired and they're contracting and they're releasing, and it's supposed to be a time of like relaxation, reflection, and rejuvenation. And so it's a time when you like even gentle exercise is recommended. This is a great time for stretching and yoga and breathing and meditative practices and reflection. Like it's a beautiful time of the month where you're supposed to be a little bit more still and quiet and internal. And so with the Jade Egg as well, I mean, I don't want to put any undue strain and pressure on the yoni when it's already going through so much and it's like it's its time of rest, and then we're like trying to make it like squeeze and contract. I mean, you can put it in and maybe just rest and breathe with it, which is lovely. But as terms of strength training, I would avoid doing any heavy strength training with the Yoni Egg while you are on your period. The other reason some people advise not using it while you're on your period is just for sanitary purposes. Jade is so dense. It's so dense. It's one of the densest stones on the planet. It's like 3.3 or 3.4 grams per centimeter cubed. It's crazy dense. So it's not likely, like if you take it out and it's covered in period blood and you still rinse it with like warm water and some like natural soap, or you give it a little soak in some water with sea salt or those oils, tea tree oil and lavender oil that I said, it should be fine. It's okay. It's a very clean egg. It's not very porous. It's like barely porous. And so rose quartz and obsidian are slightly less dense. So especially if you use those on your period, give them a really good wash like immediately after, just for sanitary purposes. But I say sanitary purposes are like a footnote. Like, yes, we don't want toxic shock, but
yeah,
it's
no
very
one else
unlikely.
is using your Jade Egg but you as well.
Yeah,
too.
hopefully.
So yeah, please don't share it. It's don't share your Jade Egg.
Yeah,
we compare ours, but we don't share.
Don't share it. They even say, there's people who say like, don't let anybody even touch your Jade Egg because like it can it's supposed to like energetically bond with you.
Yeah, and
it's your special thing.
Yeah,
so don't let other people go touching it. But yeah. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think that this is a really good start. We're almost at 30 minutes here. We do have a whole Yoni series coming out right now as well. So Kendra has lots of videos where she talks about the Yoni Egg, and then she's going to have a couple videos with some easy practices that you can start doing at home with the Yoni Egg. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, we're actually working on a Yoni program that you can purchase for yourself to begin your own Yoni practice at home. So it will be something that it'll be one of our first courses that we're offering with Eat Squat Come, and it will have video tutorials and how-tos on how to start your own healthy and happy Yoni practice. Yay! And we're super excited about that. Yoni Egg practice, sorry. And so when we launch that, we're actually going to be doing it along. Hi, Karine. We're just finishing up, but thanks for joining. Yeah, so we're gonna do the Yoni practice with all of the participants who purchase the program, and we're really excited about that. So we'll keep you posted on when we're actually launching the Yoni course. And in the meantime, we have a whole series coming out. So over the next 6 weeks now, all of our videos are going to be about Yonis, vaginas, and Jade Eggs. So.
Why we love them.
And why we love them.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Any other questions about Jade Eggs or Yonis in general before we go? Off the top of your head? Otherwise, you can leave them in the comments and we'll come back to them hopefully later. It's hard to stay on top of comments, man, but we do our best.
Well, I'm just going to do a little scroll.
Okay.
Back to the top on YouTube. Wow, Switzerland. So cool. Hi.
Thanks, Karine. Oh, that's so nice.
Richard,
I'm
your
working on
message was taken away.
I'm working on my pelvic book. It's looking good. I should have like a copy to you soon.
Hi from New Mexico. What's up, New Mexico?
New Mexico, that's great.
We are very lovely. Thank you, James. Our camera's quite pixelated. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Anyway, you can make this a show and turn.
I think that's it.
Thank you. And thank you. Okay, well, thanks so much for tuning in, guys. If you guys ever do have any questions, you can comment on our videos, especially our Yoni video that's coming up. We're as active as we can be in the comments. Sometimes they're hard to keep up with, but we do our very best. Or you can send us an email, eatsquatcome@gmail.com.
Yeah, do that. All right.
All right.
Thank
have
you
a
so
great
much.
afternoon, guys.
Yeah. Bye.